Life Stories Live.
To another live story on Zoom, Facebook and YouTube. Got an exciting story for you tonight. But before we hand over to our speaker, I just want to remind you that you can phone our number if you have any prayer requests, you have any needs. It's on your screen, +44 794 355 0287. You can also go to our website, LifeStoriesWorldwide.com. You can find lots of information of all that's going on with Life Stories. But please don't just sit there and enjoy this yourself. Tell other people. Let them know about this wonderful story that's going to come on tonight. Just tell them to contact us on either Zoom, Facebook, or YouTube. But tonight, we have Claud Jackson from Surrey. Claude has written a book. He'll probably tell you about that. But his story is from guns to God. He started with a gun in his hand at the age of 6. And he got involved in lots of crime. But now he's going back to the communities where he used to be, not with a gun in his hand, but with a Bible in his hand instead. And so I'm going to hand over to Claude to tell you his life story tonight. Over to you, Claude. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Alan. It's a pleasure to be here. And hello to everybody, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for being here tonight. It's a pleasure to be here with you. As Alan said, my name's Claude. I'm from London, England. I was born in an area called Clapham, which is the south of London, St. London's Hospital, and that's closed down now. I was raised in an area which isn't too far away from Clapham called Tooting. My grandmother lived in an area called Brixton, and all of the areas I've mentioned are fairly well known in London for various things, some good and some bad. And I'm, as you can tell, probably dual heritage, so I'm from a multicultural background. So that means my dad was from Jamaica and my mum was English. And like I said, I was raised over here. I'm one of 6, so I've got 4 older brothers and 1 sister. I'm the youngest. And growing up in my household in Tooting in the 80s, I remember it was a very difficult time because my dad was a builder. We were a working class family, to say the least, but we was always fighting to get out of poverty. And unfortunately, with a lot of pressures in life, it spilled over to the household. And there was a lot of domestic violence in my household, a lot of abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse. And I remember some of my youngest memories of my childhood. It was almost like, there's an expression I use, walking on eggshells. Home wasn't a happy place. It was constantly being shouted at by my dad, or there'd be an argument with my mum, or someone was being hit. And I remember feeling very fearful throughout my childhood in the house. And I took that energy out into the community. So when I went to school, for example, I would often fight because that was the only language I knew, really. So if I got in trouble in school, my dad would ask me what happened. And if I said, somebody hit me, he would quickly say, did you hit them back? And as long as I said yes, he would show his approval. So I found this becoming a reoccurring habit because my attention was based around negative and frankly dysfunctional behavior. And I wasn't the only one. Like I said, I've got 4 older brothers, and one by one, we all found ourselves getting caught up in crimes. And my eldest brother quickly left the family home when he could and went to live with my nan, as I mentioned, my grandmother, who was in Brixton. But he would come back every couple of weeks, once a month, And whenever he returned to visit us, he'd always tell stories of how he'd been on adventures or stole some trainers or bought some trainers or made some money. And they were always stories of adventures and stories of riches. And I remember thinking, gosh, that must be amazing. They always seem so exciting. And one particular time, he returned to the house and he gathered us all in the bedroom as he normally would. And he's about 15 years older than I. And he got us all in a circle, and I saw my other brothers gathering together, and they were all began whispering. So obviously I put down my toys at the time and went over to see what everybody was talking about. But this time, when I forced myself into the circle, I noticed that a black handgun was being passed around one by one. And each of my brothers took a turn to hold the gun. And I remember the fascination on their faces. Their eyes were filled with excitement. And I protested for a turn to hold the gun. And one of my brothers snatched it. He wanted another look. He couldn't help himself. And, you know, I went to argue and reluctantly, they gave me the gun. And as young as I was, at 6 years old, I remember I was really struck by the weight of the gun. Firstly, they're really heavy. And the coldness of the steel. I remember thinking, gosh, you know, even at that younger age, I was really aware that this was something other than a toy. It was something that was made for harm and destruction. And it was something that I would grow to become familiar with. And at that moment, I think I fell into the idea of the romance of what a life of crime could consist of for me. So at that point, I made the commitment that that's what I wanted to grow up to be. I wanted to grow up to be a gangster like my oldest brother. And he basically mentored all of us at that stage. We would finish school, and one by one, you know, they'd go to work with my dad.
LifeStories Live.
On the weekends, we never had much social time. But I'm constantly still pursuing this dream of excitement outside the home. And eventually the fighting would continue. And our house, we had moved to Mitcham, and our house got repossessed. At this stage, I was around maybe 9. And we ended up moving up to Surrey in a very small house. It was a 2-bedroom house for 7 or 8 of us. And obviously my parents took the double room. My sister took the single room, and the rest of us slept where we could. And at that time in life, I slept under the stairs. And that became my room. And I was under the stairs for a couple of years. And that's where I lived. And I went into school. At that stage, I got basically expelled because I was hardly at school. And when I was at school, I spent time in the corridor or in the hall where they would give me a desk of my own. And I don't know what it's like now, but back then they just give you a bit of paper and a pen, because they almost, it's not that they couldn't be bothered with you. They used to say, you know, I wasn't interested in learning. But I mean, I don't really recall too many people taking the time to try to teach me in a way of which I understood. And if I'm completely honest, my attention was elsewhere. I was more caught up trying to be the tough guy and the class clown and whatnot. So I spent a lot of time in the hallway, and I would fight a lot, fight with the other kids. And eventually I had to leave that school, and I headed over to an all-boys school in Surrey where we moved to. Like I said, the house got repossessed. And that all-boys school was, there was about 500 pupils, and I was 1 or 3 pupils that was of color. So there was 2 other pupils and there was me, but I was the only one who was from a mixed background. And it was literally one of the worst experiences I can recall going through in life. Every day was literally fighting. And I didn't do too badly because of my older brothers and whatnot, but some of the stuff I witnessed was very traumatizing. Some of the kids were getting badly hurt. And at that stage, I was only 11 or 12. And then you go home after school, and home isn't a safe place. And I really struggled to find comfort at that time. And it really started to take its toll on me psychologically. And the next couple of years passed by, and by the time I arrived at about the age of 14, and by now my school uniform consisted of a white shirt. Sometimes I put jeans on or trainers, and I was so disengaged from school, I didn't even know where my uniform was. And by the time I was 15, I began selling cannabis. I left school without any qualifications. So the idea of university or college just wasn't an option. And my peer group had started to outpace me, so to speak. They was doing far better than I was, because what was my prospects? You know, no qualifications, dysfunctional background, no support, mentors or role models. And I did feel very much alone. I remember at that stage, I felt very much alone. So my habit of smoking cannabis turned into a habit of selling cannabis to the kids down at the park. And, you know, I make no excuses for my behavior. I accept the decisions I made in life. And by the time I was 16, when I was 16, my father passed away. And I had mixed emotions because although my dad was such a rough man with a heavy hand, he also taught us how to be fearless in life. But the only problem was when he died, I didn't know how to switch that off. I knew how to switch it on, and I'd switched it on for most of my life, but I didn't know how to switch it off. So I went into my teens with that mentality. And I headed back towards Brixton and some of the more rougher areas in London, where I met people what was from backgrounds more similar to my own, because Brixton's a very urban area with lots of nationalities within the community. And I met people who were really successful at drug dealing. And I started to relate to individuals. And quickly, my dealing of cannabis turned into cocaine. And by the time I was 19, I bought a convertible sports car. I didn't have insurance. I didn't have a driver's license, but it was a really expensive vehicle. And I don't say that proudly. I say that just to highlight the mentality of an individual, that when you come from such a dysfunctional lifestyle, you haven't even got the sense to know if you're going to get a vehicle, at least get a driver's license. And I ended up crashing that vehicle actually in a really bad road collision. And I went to hospital that night. They rushed me to hospital for an operation. And ironically, the vehicle crashed, it turned over, it rolled, so to speak, and it stopped outside of a church. And when I climbed out of the car, I collapsed outside the church. And I remember even then, although I never knew God, I remember thinking, it's a bit odd, isn't it? You know, to have a car crash and land outside of a church. So they rushed me to hospital that night, and they operated on me. And while I was recovering in the waiting room on my own, a nurse came along and asked me how I'm doing. And obviously I was distressed. And she knew my name, and she said, "Do you know, Claude, I'm not supposed to be working tonight, but they rang me up and asked me if I could cover somebody's shift." And I was thinking, gosh, what's she talking about? Why is she telling me this? And she said, "I think I'm here to talk to you, Claude."
LifeStories Live.
And I want to let you know that, you know, God loves you and he's calling you. And there's a battle over your life. And if I'm completely honest, I sort of shrugged it off, as you do when you're 19 and you know everything. And she gave me a number, and life went on. I recovered. I went back to dealing. And I did that for around the next 5 years consistently. And it went from bad to worse, if I'm honest. It just, people, some of my clientele, some of my customers overdosed. Another guy killed himself. And these were people who I was in contact with every day. And then I thought to myself, you know, this isn't what I imagined it to be. I thought it was going to be all about riches and the fast life. But instead, I was dealing with a lot of death. And the reality was I was mid-20s. And like I said, someone who was one of my customers killed himself. Another guy overdosed and died. And somebody else, their organs failed all within the space of a year. And I started to question what role I was playing in this. But I had already been selling drugs now for at least 10 or 12 years. And I really didn't feel like I could find a way out. I just thought I'd committed to the idea that I'll be a drug dealer forever. And my house, you know, my mum's house would get raided by the police. And I got arrested in my early 20s. And I got arrested with a chap. And I just remember being in the cell, and the police interviewed me first of all, and they brought a sports holder out. And it was only when they emptied the contents of the sports bag on the table that I actually saw the drugs in a different light, sort of thing. There was so much drugs. And the police officer said to me, "You know, you're going away for a long time." And I went back to the cell. And that night, I didn't really know how to pray. But as you do when your back's against the wall, I got on my knees in the police cell and I prayed that God would intervene. And I don't know if he answered the prayer or not, but the next morning when I was supposed to be going to court, the chap who I'd got arrested with said to the police that the drugs were all his and he'd take the blame for all of it. And the police officers said to me, you're going home. And I was in so much shock. I said, why? And they said, the chap you're with, mate, has took the blame. They was as surprised as I was. And that chap ended up getting 5.5 years behind that, which isn't a very long time in some people's books in the criminal world. But for narcotics, 5.5 years is a healthy sentence. So I managed to get out of that. And of course, I was still ignorant enough to go back and sell more drugs. And I was about 26 or 27 at this point, full of hatred for the world, full of hurt for the world. Never really had a job, couldn't hold a job, never really had a decent relationship, couldn't hold down a decent relationship, never knew anyone who was very sensible. So the whole life just became one big circle of turmoil and distress. It really was a hot mess. And by that stage, I would sleep on top of my bed fully clothed, because I was so fearful that the police would raid my house or rival drug dealers would raid my house. And I would get changed when I got showered, and that was my daily routine. The blinds would be firmly shut. And that's how I was living day-to-day life. It was really almost madness, speaking about it now. It was really dysfunctional. And I said, you know what, I need a cover up, because it's been nearly 20 years and I was just selling drugs. Like, the police would pull me in, search me. And once they arrested me in Croydon to search me, took me to the police station, and I had about £1,000, under £1,000 on me at the time. And they took the £1,000 and let me go 48 hours later. And when I said, "Where's my money?" everybody said, "What money? What? We don't know what you're talking about." And I remember thinking, God, I'm really, it felt like everything was caving in on me. The police was doing what they wanted with me when they wanted to. I was trying to avoid rivals. I'd sold drugs to everyone I knew. My eldest brother, a lot of my family members had turned to drugs. My brother ended up overdosing and had 2 stints in his heart replaced. And life, if you can imagine what that's like, living that nightmare. And I saw an opportunity came up to mentor young offenders for the local council, the local government, as a volunteer. So I thought, what better cover-up opportunity to say I'm mentoring these young men. And after all, I think secretly I thought, I've got stuff in common with them. Maybe this is something I could do. And I went along, and it was while I was there volunteering that the manager of the council was a really nice, down-to-earth, humble guy. And I'd go in as flash and, big-headed, cocky.